This is Tales from the Morphing Grid, and I am the Coyote Nice Sensei. Today's topic is Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Season 2. And when Season 2 came out, it, the first three episodes came on prime time and titled The Mutiny. And for one, I always thought the Mutiny title was a little strange because what was mutinying? Like what? Who was having the mutiny? Is it in reference to the Rangers needing to fight you know, their Zords? Well, four of them were frozen, so they had to deal with a controlled or a Z-controlled Dragon Zord and Tyrannosaurus Zord. So is that the mutiny, or I don't know? It seemed like an odd name for it. Anyway, this season became rather divisive. At the time, those of us who were kids watching it probably didn't watching this season, not the episode. When they were watching this season, we felt some type way with it, but I think a lot of us kept watching and we didn't really have strong feelings with it we later that later developed as we became adults. Like when I so what I'm referring to is season 2, there was a lot of changes going on. Not just within the story, like new characters, but within behind the scenes. So you have Rita is no longer the main villain. She gets booted out by Lord Zed, Emperor that all that he sees, and this was Lord Zed was an American only villain. So he's not from the Sentai, and he is probably one of the best looking villains that we've ever created, and very menacing, frightening. And he ended up getting toned down because he was too scary for children. Although I loved him, a lot of people do. Um, I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna try and prevent myself from going on a Cosmic Fury related rant about him. But anyway, maybe when I do the Cosmic Fury episode, I'll do that rant. But so Zed is the new villain in town, and he uh, is a force to be reckoned with right off the bat. He takes control of two of the Zords and freezes the other four, and forcing the Rangers to get new Zords. And so now they're using the Thunder Zords, and this comes from the Die Ranger Sentai. Um, and the way they worked it was the old Zords would be transformed into the new Zords. But the Rangers would retain their normal suits, their Ranger suits. But it worked. Like within the story, it seemed to work out fine. Uh, and then so you had that change. Um, Within the villains, Goldar was the only one that really stayed behind. The other ones were there, but they were kind of pushed away. Finster, the monster maker, kind of does his own thing now because he doesn't. He was the monster maker for Rita, but Zed makes his own monsters, so he's not needed though. So the other, Finster, Squat, and Babu, they're pushed off to the side. You see them on occasion. Usually, Squat and Babu are looking at Zed from behind a wall, and I'm like, why? Zed creates his own putties, and so that's the changes amongst the villains. But then, maybe roughly halfway through the season, um, we get a big change within the Rangers. So the reason for this was the actors for Zach, Trini, and Jason left the show because of pay disputes. They weren't getting paid enough. They stood up. They wanted more money, and Saban booted them. And the rumor has it that the original plan was for the six of them, all six Rangers, to stand up and ask for all this money together. And I'm wondering what would have you got two things that would have happened. You got one that Saban says, "Okay, I don't want all six of you leaving, so here uh, I'll give you what you're asking." Or he decides to can all six of them and bring on six new people to take on the powers. Now, what this could have done uh, within the story would be a way to, if they ended up getting rid of all six and bringing in new ones, what they could have done was this would allow them to bring in the Die Ranger suits. So you have new powers, new people, everything. And Tommy wouldn't have been the White Ranger. You would have, well, quite possibly Brad Hawkins, who was slated to be the White Ranger. Um, and Brad Hawkins was actually the character of Ryan Steele in VR Troopers. Um, so, so that could have been a possibility. But it ended up just being Zach Trini and Jason's actors, and then we ended up getting um, Adam, Aisha, and Rocky, and they were okay. I wasn't too fond of them because Zach and Trini were my two of my tops, and they left the show, and now they're replaced by these new people, and I didn't really like that, so I was kind of against these new Rangers. But when Zio came around, I actually felt that Adam and Rocky, because those guys stuck around for Zio, they became their own characters, and they weren't just replacements. Aisha ended up leaving the show at the end of season three, so she didn't really ever become a full character on her own, um, not in the capacity that Rocky and Adam had. So she just always felt like a Trini replacement to me, anyway. Um, so that was the big change. You had these three come in and make changes, and I feel, and I'm probably going to be doing some. Well, I know actually I am going to do some spoilers of my stories that I'm writing because I did mention in my very episode zero um, that one of the things I'll be doing on this is reading my fan fiction, my glorified outlines. So, and one of those um, ideas, one of those projects, is a rewrite of Power Rangers. And when it comes, and basically that's just kind of fixing things, having things make a little bit more sense. Um, and one of those was fixing how season two played out. I would, in the rewrite, would be still using all of the characters that are in the franchise and not doing it to my own wishes. Um, but so my idea for the story is when we get the replacements, when Rocky, Adam, and Aisha come in, there's a setup, for it. Um, and it's, um, I'm losing my train of thought. God damn it. So when they come in and you got the setup for it, just like how in the actual season two you had them go to a different planet to find uh, this I think they called it the Sword of Power or something, and basically it would be this grandiose thing where they would transfer the powers to the new group. Now I know I'm going to go on this little tangent before I get to my actual idea, um, but with with the transfer that was really inconsistent anyway. Um, you still had Jason, Zach, and Trini still morphed. They were still in their suits, And the real world reason for this is that the actors were gone, and so they needed the body doubles for them. So that was the real world reason. But what's the in universe reason? Well, my idea for that is that they still maintain the powers, and that the powers were not transferred but merely copied. And this would explain why Jason has his powers in Forever Red. They never directly state how he maintains these, how he still has his powers, why he's retained them. And it would explain that how Zack and Trini still have their powers when you have, well, once and always, and then um, you have the other episodes that the Black and Yellow Rangers show up that are said to be Zack and Trini, but we don't see their faces. Um, like the finale in Super Mega Force, as well as Beast Morphers Grid Connection. You see a lot of morphed Rangers, and those are supposed to be the original five. Um, and so that's, a lot of fans are actually using that their head canon with that is to explain why they have their powers. They still have their powers, but they were supposed to be transferred. So now my other idea to properly transition things, because that way it just doesn't feel like they're full replacements, but they can become their own characters in a sense, would be using this would be a good time to use the Die Ranger suits. And my idea for this would be, so if you're watching season two, the beginning, of season two, Tommy still has his Green Ranger powers, and he's still he's losing them. They're so slowly fading, and then Zed is able to destroy them. And then he later comes back as the White Ranger. Now, watching season one and two, when Tommy loses his powers the first time due to the green candle, Tommy just disappears. He makes one appearance um, in an episode at the very end, and then he doesn't come back until later, um, when Zordon is able to kind of recharge the coin a little bit. And then that bleeds over into season two, and then Zed is able to completely destroy the powers. And then after that, you don't see Tommy again until he comes back for White Light. And that's when he's given the White Ranger powers. Now, it's kind of weird that they do that to him because A, he's Kimberly's boyfriend. Like, when he leaves the first time after the candle incident, they become an official couple. He kisses her, and then the next episode he's gone, and then he doesn't come back until that one cameo, and then permanently uh, in Return of an Old Friend. But in season two, when he loses them completely, and before he becomes the White Ranger, he's gone. He just disappears. They're high school students. Where the hell did he go? So it's like he was trying to figure himself out. They don't explain where he went. He just disappeared, and then in White Light, Kimberly gets a letter and saying that Tommy's coming home at the end of the week, and I'm like, well, why? Where did he go? Why did he take this trip? Why is he skipping classes? And so they don't explain any of that. Well, what they could do to do that, in to explain why the actor is not there or the character, is Zordon can say locate the power jewels, and this would be in reference to the Lilac jewels in Die Ranger. And so he sends Tommy on this quest to find the White Tiger power jewel. And then so Tommy's gone, and you have the status quo of the main five doing their thing, and this going in tandem with the contract disputes. So then you have, so in the story, Tommy's off world doing something, and or even it could be somewhere on Earth, just somewhere remote or whatever, Russia. And he gets into trouble. Zed sends a monster after him, and he, needs to fend it off while finding his jewel or whatever the danger is. Something that forces the range. Actually, no, this wouldn't work if it's on Earth. Um, so it'd have to be off-world. Um, so it's off-world somewhere, and kind of like how they traveled to this other world to get the sort of power. You can use the same storyline. This is where um, Serpentera is introduced, and you can still use that. And so you have the five Rangers being sent by Zordon to go help Tommy. Tommy's in trouble. He needs help. And at that time, at the same time, not only does Tommy find the White Tiger power jewel, but he finds the other five power jewels. And, which Zordon would have thought were gone. They were lost. But he had only known of the continued existence of the White Tiger. So they they have all six jewels. And then they teleport back. But you have the only ones that come back are Tommy, Billy, and Kimberly. Zach, Trini, and Jason are lost. And I don't mean they're killed off or anything, but they're trapped. They're unable to return. Um, and so whatever stuff, any idea that prevents them um, from coming home. And so now you have a Power Ranger team that's at half power, well, less than half power, with Tommy still not having the powers, but they do have the power jewels, um, and Kimberly and Billy being the only remaining original Rangers left. But they can't form the Megazord, they can't do anything. So, either, and this can go in two options. They immediately find the replacements, or it can be an episode, an arc of them finding, who would fill in the gaps. Um, so ultimately, it would come down to Billy and Kimberly uh, giving up their mighty morphin the power coins in favor of the power jewels. And so then you have Kimberly being the white or the pink um, Die Ranger. Billy would be the blue Die Ranger. Tommy, of course, would take on the White Tiger, the White Ranger. And then you have the introduction of Rocky, Adam, and Aisha. And they take on their power jewels, with Aisha taking the yellow one, Rocky taking red, and then Adam taking green. And so he would never be a Black Ranger. He would just be always a Green Ranger. Because Adam does stick around for Zeo and Turbo, where those are Green Rangers. So this would at least help the characters feel like their own, rather than just replacements. And I think that would have been a better story to help transition, into with the new team. And because you have these moments where, like, when they leave, when Jason, Trini, and Zach leave, it's unceremonious. There's no heartfelt emotions. There's nothing. It's like, okay, bye. Yeah, we've been serving this war together for over a year, and we've been you know sharing blood, sweat, and tears. But okay, bye. That's it. Power up. And that's actually what they say. Tommy says, "Hey, remember, guys, power up." And they do their little fist pump, and then they get teleported away, and that's it. And then Billy's like, "Oh, I'm gonna miss them." I'm like, "What the? Why is it like? Why is there no emotion there? Like, did you hate these guys? Like, come on now." And so that would a new story like my idea would help bridge that, because then you wouldn't be able to get that goodbye. Um, because yeah, the actors aren't there, and yeah, it does kind of feel weird to say goodbye to just the body doubles. But the way they really did it was just, it didn't feel right. There was no emotion behind it, and then so you you get that, and then this would also allow Tommy to rightfully become the leader of the Power Rangers. Um, because Rocky, he's a rookie. There's no way he's going to lead the team. They're still using like the same footage of them and the Zords, because the Red Ranger usually takes point, and that's from when Jason was around. So there'd be no reason for him to, for Rocky to be in charge. So Tommy would naturally take over. Um, and with Tommy now leader, um, you wouldn't have this weird, or well, yeah, the way that they would do it with my idea, um, is that with Tommy leader in this way, it would not feel so weird as how they really did it, because in White Light, when the White Ranger's revealed, and Zordon says, I assume that you're happy, or you're pleased with the new leader of the power team. And it cuts to Jason, and Jason's like, oh, this is great. I don't think that was the original intent. I think the intent was like the new member of the power team, because they were having several episodes where there was like this rivalry between Jason and Tommy. One of them, which dealing with the slippery shark, and those two are under a spell and fighting the whole time, and going on who's the better leader. And so you've had those moments of them fighting, and then suddenly Jason just kind of rolls over and accepts it. Like, no, like that he would be righteously pissed about it. Like, where did this come from? Why are you giving Tommy the sudden leadership when he has been gone this whole time? Why is Jason getting demoted? So with this new story idea of mine, this would allow Tommy to rightfully be leader without any real problems. And the reason they had done it the way they did was because Jason, the actor, was leaving. Austin St. John was leaving, and they wanted to kind of have some sort of transition into it. They didn't really need to do that, in my opinion. They could have just, allow Tommy to just become the de facto leader when Jason leaves. They didn't have to announce it. I think even us as kids, we would have realized, that's what was happening when Rocky comes in, and and Tommy's kind of taking up. He's calling for the morph, or whatever. He's calling all the shots. Yeah, we would assume that he takes the leadership role. Yeah, Billy and Kimberly would have been there, longer, but neither one of them are leaders per se. So, and this one leads into my idea that Tommy was never a great leader. He could have been like the face of the Power Rangers of that era, but I don't. My idea is that when you look at him and Jason, Jason was the better leader, and because let's be real, that Tommy's rise to leadership was abrupt, and there was no reason for it, and so you have him doubting himself. He's struggling with losing his Green Ranger powers, and then he comes back and he's White Ranger, and then he's the leader, and suddenly he's super awesome. I mean, I like Tommy. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying he's a terrible character by any means. It was just his him as leader just didn't feel right. I mean, not until later, Zeo and Turbo. Well, Turbo, he was barely there, but in Zeo, I'm like, okay, yeah, he feels like a more of a leader here. But with him as leader of the MMPR team, it wasn't. there because, so like I said, no build up, no real transition. Jason gets demoted, and that's it. Um, Behind the scenes, it makes sense. I don't think he would have become the leader had Austin St. John stayed. Um, but Tommy has kind of always been a solo, a solo act, a lone wolf type. And this is due to the Jew Ranger stock footage of the way the Green Ranger was written and his storyline. So they kind of had to have Tommy mimic that in a way with his own story. But even as the White Ranger, he still stood out because the White Ranger suit was from Die Ranger, and he's mixing in with Zoo Ranger suits from the previous Sentai, so he stands out in that way. He's white, so that his suit color is white, so that is a big contrast to the other. He's got a big ass shield, so there's a lot of things that contrast with the other suits. So he stands out in many ways. So he's often fighting alone, and he takes up a lot of screen time. If you watch the movie, the '95 movie, he's saying everything. He's almost borderline Michael Burnham before Michael Burnham existed, if you have watched Star Trek Discovery. But Tommy will always be so much better than Michael Burnham. I can't stand Michael Burnham in Star Trek Discovery. Tommy is at least likable. Um, so yeah, the way that he just did not feel like a proper leader. Jason, he's there from day one. He, uh, pretty calm under pressure. He went head to head with Goldar on Morphe. Tommy did too, but Jason kind of held his own a little bit better. He also fought a Green Ranger Tommy and held his own. Um, so they're evenly matched as characters, but he was able to deal with it without his morpher. And like one good example is that Tommy, and this is off of memory, I don't recall Tommy really inspiring the team. Like, like he can be, you know, he's strong for sure, but he, like, when the team is down, he wasn't really he wasn't inspiring them. Jason did. And I'm sure if you're, you know, as proficient in Power Ranger lore as I am, and you know what I'm going to say, you know, when they were fighting the Green Ranger and they were down and out, the Zords were gone and Zordon's gone, and just like they're racking up losses, like they're what 0-3, 0-4 against Tommy or whatever by that point, and you know, Jason's like, even just like the littlest bit, isn't that a reason to keep on fighting? Like he refuses to give up, and he would have gone out there alone to fight everybody. If the team gave up, he would have continued on by himself. So he was leading by example, and and he was able to inspire his teammates. Yeah, his leadership wasn't really flashy, but it was steady, and you could trust him. I'm not saying the other Rangers didn't trust Tommy, but there was a difference between the two. Um, like they trusted Jason, and they didn't they followed him, because they trusted him, not because they were told to follow him. As for Tommy, yeah, he's a great character. He has heart. Brave, loyal. He is inspiring in his own way, but not in a leadership way, if that makes sense. Yeah, he was much more of a, I don't want to say reactive because the Power Rangers kind of have to be reactive. They're more of a defensive team. They can't really go on the offense. But watching him is just like there's a difference between the two of them. And yes, of course, there's characters, but he was not leadership material. He was usually the one, fighting alone while the rest did their thing. And even in the Zords, most of the time they were forming the regular Megazord, the Thunder Megazord, and he's off in his Tiger Zord. Yes, they did combine, but that wasn't as often. Um, so he was more of the lone hero archetype, and that's not really leadership. Like that's not a good for a team. Um, he could be a symbolic leader, if anything, like the face of the group, but everyone else, you know, they weren't being led. They were still doing their thing. And so he's the face, the icon, whatever. And that's fine from the storytelling angle, but in universe, like from real world to the in universe thing, watching it all, Jason was the one who really led the team. Jason united them, and because like, all right, look at it. So I brought in the Green with Evil. They're 0-4, and he inspires the team to keep fighting. But look at what else he was doing. Like if you even go back to all the way to episode 1, he's like look at Billy. Billy had zero confidence, and he's helping Billy train. He's training him on martial arts and building Billy's confidence. Kimberly and Trini and Zach, they already had their confidence, but he was able to bring them closer. Um, like he trusted Zach enough for Zach to be his second in command, and you can see that in their fighting styles. Um, so yeah, Tommy, he could inspire people in his own way, but Jason is the one that built the team. He built how, raise their stats. Is that how I want to say it? Improve their stats, something along those lines. I'm thinking of like a create a character in a video game, but um, they were more of a real team with Jason, but with Tommy, it kind of they were more like followers, if that makes sense. And it kind of plays into the show. When Tommy became leader, the show went from being called Power Rangers to Tommy featuring the Power Rangers. Um, so that's my thing with them. Like I think that Jason is a better leader than Tommy. If you don't think so, tell me why you think so. Tell me why Tommy is the better leader. Um, if I actually had written this down and actually, made notes, I would probably be more concise with my words. But I like speaking more off the cuff about things. Feels more natural. Because when it comes to reading, I kind of have this weird tone to my voice, and it doesn't sound natural. So I'm kind of wondering how I'm going to do my reading of my stories. Um, so that's my take on Jason and Tommy, and who was the better leader. Um, now, what else was I going to do? I think that's about it. I think that's everything I was thinking about for season 2. Um, I got some. I got some ideas for the next episode, but I haven't decided if I'm gonna wait and do season 3 and then just finish out Mighty Morphin, or if I'm just gonna jump to something else just to kind of mix it up a little bit. I don't know. Um, Season 3 is probably my least favorite of the three. It goes in order. One's my favorite, then two, then three. Um, but I don't know. I have to figure out what I want to do. Which one's better? Whether I'm going to read a story or whether I'm going to talk about, my own ideas about something or whatever. That's why they call me the Coyote Night Sensei. I am that unreliable. Um, so yeah, so that's how I think about season two. My thoughts about it. Um, so it's not a terrible season, but it definitely is divisive. It definitely is a point in the franchise where we we wish things had turned out differently. Yeah, like we don't hate the replacements, but we wish they would have been used elsewhere. Um, Zach, Trini, and Jason, had they stayed, that is the biggest what if, one of the biggest what ifs in the franchise. How far would the original Mighty Morphin team go had those three stayed? Would they finish out season three? Would they become the Zero Rangers, or would the Zero Rangers be a whole different team? Things like that. So those are my thoughts. You know, if you listen to this, if you're still here, and if you are able to withstand the sound of my voice and you enjoyed listening to this, you can tell me your thoughts, your opinions, and tell me how bad I'm doing. That's perfectly acceptable. I'm probably going to tell myself how bad I'm doing once I hit the stop button. So that is it for this episode. Next episode should be out next month. I try to do at least once a month when I have time, but I have a clan of children, so the only time I really get to do this is at night, and so, but even then, it's kind of hard to get the energy to sit here and talk at a computer screen without any real feedback. So, all that being said, hopefully I can get the next one out in November. I had to do this today because it's the end of October and I want to get this out before October ends, just so I can remain consistent with having one every month. So if I can get one out in November, I don't know when that will be. So we'll see. And I will decide on what topic we're doing. And when it comes to if I do Power Ranger seasons, when I talk about them, I probably won't do them in order. Like with 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 podcasts like the Power Trip, they went in order. They started with MMPR season one, and they went all the way to the end to Cosmic Fury in that order. I want to do MMPR before I get to another season, another team. So I might jump to say, Samurai or uh, God, I don't know if I want to do Cosmic Fury. That one just annoys me. But in any case, they'll probably be out of order. So, all right. So until next time, this has been Coyote Nai Sensei, and you have been listening to Tales from the Morphing Grid.